Hello, everyone, and welcome to IBL On Deck, sponsored by Rawlings. My name is Jackson Farough, and it's great to be with you tonight. Now, if you're a regular viewer of IBL On Deck, then I'm probably a new face to you. And if that's the case, well, nice to meet you. Really excited to take the reins as a solo host for the next little while here and interviewing some great guests over the next couple weeks, including tonight. We have a really good guest. And, we're going to be telling some really interesting stories, not just about the IBL, but really baseball as a whole as it relates to the major leagues or the Olympics or the Hall of Fame or whatever it is. Tonight, we got a little mixed bag for you with all of that, as our guest has an incredible resume. It's going to be a lot of fun. Whether you're young or old, we got something for you. Perhaps, you just finished work and you want to take your mind off of it. Well, here you go. Some really cool baseball stories. So really excited to present all that to you tonight and in the future. Before we get to our interview with our special guest, we do have some info to share with you about the upcoming IBL season. Well, that was announced last Thursday, January 21st, that the league set a target date of June 1st to begin its 102nd season. Historically, the schedule begins the first weekend in May, but this change was made, of course, in response to the pandemic. The league is going to stick with its full 36-game schedule, and instead of declaring a champion around Labor Day, they're actually going to push the playoffs towards the end of September. And final changes are being made, and the schedule will be out very soon. Minimum standards were adopted. The Major Council passed a motion to approve minimum standards for the member clubs to adhere to for this 2021 season and beyond. Now, these standards, which include an incentive for teams, will audit the fan experience, the on-field baseball operations, umpires, marketing, and multimedia sections. The approval formalized and entrenched the minimum standards program, which began 4 years ago. And finally, new extra innings rule. Probably saw it in the major leagues. The league approved a proposal from the director of umpires to adopt a new extra inning rule during the regular season. So starting this year, the IBL will follow the Major League Baseball extra inning rule that began during the 2020 season. So during extra innings, the team at bat will begin with a runner at second base, and that runner will be the last at bat out from the previous inning. All right, well, now with our housekeeping taken care of, we have a very, very special guest tonight from Sarnia, Ontario, played for the Stratford Hillers way back in the early 80s before heading off to St. Clair Community College and then the University of Kansas. Was drafted in the 32nd round of the 1985 Major League Baseball draft. Also played for Team Canada in the 1984 Summer Olympics in Los Angeles. Spent some time in the minors before shifting to coaching in the Tiger system in 1988, and then joined the New York Yankees organization in 1990. Spent the next three decades with the Bronx Bombers in many different roles, including director of player development. During his time there, he secured 5 World Series rings as part of the organization. Now, from 2009 to 2014, Thomson was the Yankees' third base coach and was also a bench coach for part of his tenure with the Yankees, too. Prior to 2018, he was hired by the Philadelphia Phillies as a bench coach, where he will head into his 4th season in that position with the Phillies this season. He was also inducted into the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame in 2019. Without further ado, enough of me rambling on. Let's welcome our guest. It's Rob Thomson, everyone. Rob, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, we're going to talk about your time at the Olympics, your coaching, Major League Baseball, the whole deal. But first, put us in your shoes at the very beginning. It's 1982, right? You're walking into the clubhouse at National Stadium in Stratford for the first time. If you remember, what were you thinking in that moment? And what was your experience like in your first year in the Inter-County Baseball League?
Pretty interesting, because prior to that, I'd gone 1 year to St. Clair Community College. So it was the summer of '82 that I was there. And, I'd always kind of followed the Inter-County. My brothers had played junior Inter-County when Sarnia was in that league years and years ago. So I kind of followed the Inter-County and knew that it was really good baseball. So I was, when Dennis Schooley and Bill McLaughlin came to Port Huron to talk to me about coming to Stratford, I was really excited and I was really honored that they would even think of me for that league. I was only 19 years old. So going to Stratford for the first time was a great experience, and it was different. I thought about it a lot, that, college baseball is one thing, but you're playing with guys your own age. They're there to hit home runs, get strikeouts, create stats so they can get drafted. Whereas the Inter-County, it was the first time that I was able to play with grown men. And so it's kind of a different game, because these guys have been around a long time. They know their way around a baseball diamond. And I just learned so much from them on how to approach the game from an experience standpoint, being around guys like the Landreth brothers, Larry and Doug Landreth, about game calling as a catcher and running the game and being a leader and doing things like that. So it was a great experience. I love intercounty baseball. I love the league. I love playing there. And if I had to do it over again, I'd do it every single time.
Now, you talk about how you love the league, and I, a lot of fans are really happy to hear that. I mean, it's such a great tradition for a lot of families here to come on out to the ballpark. It's a relatively cheap experience, and it's a really good one. Do you have any good stories from your IBL days that you feel free to share on a YouTube live stream?
Well, there's so many good stories. I remember the year we played St. Thomas in the semifinals. I think it would have been probably '83. And they had a phenomenal club, and we go into that ballpark there in St. Thomas, and it was packed every night that we were there. And we'd come back to Stratford, and it was packed every night. And I really wasn't, being from Corunna actually, and then Sarnia, I'd never really played in front of that many fans, and there was a real passion there with the fan base of both cities. And it was a lot of fun because everybody on that field wanted to win.
Were you nervous?
Yeah, to a certain extent, because like I said, I'd never really played in front of that many people. There had to be, I don't know, 4,000 or 5,000 people in St. Thomas for sure. And then, Stratford was packed, not a very big ballpark, but still the fans were out and they were cheering on. So it was a great atmosphere and something to learn from.
Absolutely. Of course, fans who are watching, you can definitely submit your questions to us at any point in the chat. Feel free to do so, and we'll try to get to some of those. Rob, what was your favorite town in the IBL to visit back when you played on the road? Was there one ballpark or one town that you loved, maybe because of the fans or the clubhouse or whatever it was?
Probably London because of Labatt Park. I mean,
Right.
And I ended up working there with the London Tigers. The first year the London Tigers were there, I happened to be one of the coaches. So that was a great thrill. But yeah, going to London was really good because they had such really good players, Larry Haggett, Art Needy, and on and on and on. So they really had a great club, and it was a good rivalry. And playing on that surface and that ballpark, it was really special because that's a big league surface there.
Absolutely. And it's so historic as well, especially now. All right. Looks like we do have a fan question in the chat. What was your most memorable thing about playing in Stratford besides your great teammates?
Probably the fact I met my wife here and that's where we live. We live just outside of Stratford, but I had to leave for a bit to be the farm director with the Yankees. So I had to move to Tampa for a while, but I love Stratford. And I have great memories here. I think also there were so many things, but coming to Stratford my first couple of years, I was able to play both senior and junior, which really helped me because now I'm playing 4 or 5 times a week. And so I got a lot of playing time, a lot of reps, and it really helped me out a lot. I think being on the buses with my teammates after games, riding home and had a lot of fun, and especially after a win. My teammates, the city of Stratford, building a family here, that was real special.
Definitely. Well, thanks, Bill, very much for your question. So I guess, yeah, that was one of my questions too. Your favorite part, you sort of already answered it. Do you remember did you have any crazy fan encounters or maybe just cool fan moments from the IBL from your time there in the early 80s that you remember at all?
I think probably the going back to that St. Thomas series, and I think it was '83, maybe it was '82, I'm not sure. But anyway, just how rabid the fans and passionate fans were in St. Thomas, and they were getting on you, and it was a great learning experience. Now that I've gone through New York and Philadelphia, a little bit smaller scale, but
sure.
it was a lot of fun, and they were passionate, and I loved it. To me, it was like playing in the big leagues at that time.
Oh, absolutely at that point, right? Yeah, definitely. And you would know, especially now going through the minors as well afterwards, just how important and how loyal those fans are in those small markets, right?
Oh yeah, that's it's a moneymaker for some towns, but it's really good because especially in the minor leagues, you get a lot of fan support and you get a lot of fans that help these young kids that are on their own for the first time possibly. And they have fan clubs and help them out and get them blankets and take them out to dinner and do those little things to make it a little more family atmosphere for the players.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of sort of a family atmosphere, I want to transition a little bit to your time on the Canadian Olympic baseball squad in 1984. So, how did you find out that you were going to the Olympics? Was it a phone call? Was it a letter? Take us through that experience of just realizing, oh, I'm going to be an Olympian.
Well, I've been I've been playing in the intercounty for a couple of years, and I had some offers to go to the Team Canada prior to that,
Hmm.
and I just wanted to stay in Stratford. I liked it there. I was playing every night. I was happy, and it was a great competition for me. Um, so in '84, once I found out that Team Canada was going to the Olympics, I called Eric McKenzie, the manager and Bill McKenzie, who was at that point general manager of Team Canada, and I asked them if I could come to Tecumseh and work out, and they said, "Yeah, come on." And Mike Gardner, one of my teammates who ended up pitching in the big leagues, he was pitching in Stratford. So the two of us went to Tecumseh and worked out and made the club. And yeah, it was really special to find out that I was going to be able to represent my country in the Olympics in the sport that I love. So really a phenomenal thing and something I will never forget.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. How did it feel? You played at Dodger Stadium, correct? How was
Yeah.
that experience playing
Oh,
there as, a kid still, and now you're playing in a big league ballpark and a pretty historic one too.
yeah. And so we were talking earlier about being a little nervous, playing in St. Thomas. Now you go to Dodger Stadium.
Right.
We played Nicaragua in the first game, and there were 52,000 people there.
Wow.
Every game in the Olympics was sold out, so it was unbelievable. And I, the first play of the game was a pop up behind the plate. I caught it. I still don't remember catching it because I was so nervous. I could feel myself shaking in my squat. So it was a phenomenal experience. We had a great club, really bunch of really great guys on that club. Stevie Wilson, Mike Gardner, a couple of guys went to the big leagues off that club. So it was a lot of fun.
Now, did you stay in the athletes' village?
Yeah, so we stayed at USC. So
Okay.
I believe there were two hubs. There was USC and UCLA. We stayed at USC, and you know, all the athletes were walking around. I kind of felt like I was at a place I didn't belong there.
Right.
But we were staying in the same kind of area as the U.S. basketball team at that
Oh,
time, and they had Michael Jordan and all those
right.
guys, Wayman Tisdale and all these guys, and so we'd see them in there eating because everybody in that area ate at the same places. It's kind of a buffet, and so we'd
Right.
see them in there eating, and it was really incredible.
Wow. Was there anything about that experience, whether it be in the athletes' village or playing at Dodger Stadium or just being at the Olympics that maybe surprised you or you weren't expecting or no one really warned you about?
I think the amount of security that was
Mm.
around the complex. They had three fences separating the outside world from the Olympic Village, and there were policemen and security all over the place. But it was a little bit daunting when you first walk in there, and you got to go around barricades so that nobody can run a truck through there
Right.
and do some damage. So,
Mm.
but over the whole thing was just incredible and unfortunate. So Stratford that year, we were in the playoffs, and Mike and I asked if we could leave. So we were out of the tournament. We won one and lost two. So we're out of the tournament. We're not going to the medal round. And but the team was staying for the closing ceremonies, and Mike and I asked to come to leave the closing ceremonies or before the closing ceremonies so we could go back and play our playoff series with the Hillers.
Well, it's commitment.
Yeah.
You must have, when you came back, you come back to Stratford after playing in the Olympics. What was sort of the reception when you came back? Did you feel like a rock star all of a sudden?
No, not really. I mean, in Stratford, there's been a whole lot of NHL players running around here
Sure.
and a lot of good baseball players. So I didn't feel like anybody treated me any differently. I got a lot of questions about what the experience was like, but I felt right back at home. So not too
Looks like
much
we have a
stress.
couple more fan questions here from our chat. Why did you choose number 59? Good question.
I didn't really. The Yankees gave it to me, and then when I went, so I've had 59 since 2004, my first year in the big leagues. And when I went to Philly, they asked me if I wanted 59. I said, well, it doesn't really matter to me. And they said, well, it's open. And I said, okay, well, then I'll take it. Not too many guys want 59.
I guess, right? Sort of an obscure number.
Yeah.
What was your most memorable World Series and why? I know you worked with the organization, the Yankees, for a long time and got the rings that way. But I guess, yeah, that's a good question. Out of all the World Series that the Yankees played while you were there, which one was most memorable?
Yeah. So the only one that we were involved in when I was immediately with the team was 2009. So
Oh, nine, right.
that would be my most memorable World Series. And the other four, one of the rings I got, I was AAA hitting coach. And then the other three were, I was either the field coordinator or a farm director. I'm not sure, but '09 was the only one that I was on the field,
Right.
and it was against Philly, which I ended up going to,
Right.
and so it was very memorable.
Crazy how life works, eh? When you actually building off that, I was going to ask you this a bit later, but since it came up, the first time that you received a World Series ring, right after your whole baseball journey, starting all the way back in Stratford, you look at that ring. Was it in a box? Like, tell me about the first time you got the ring and you were like, wow, this actually happened here.
Yeah, so I got it so we won in '96. So I got it in spring training in '97, and so I was still in the minor league. So they had a big ring ceremony for all the coaches and scouts. They came in during spring training, spent a morning handing out these rings, and yeah, that one came in a little box. The other ones are a little bigger box, but it came in a little box, and I can remember, and I mean, the more years I'm in this game, the more I realize it. But I can remember thinking there aren't many guys that have one of these, and how fortunate I am. I'm fortunate enough to be around great coaches, people, great players to just kind of hitch my wagon to this thing and get something like this.
Absolutely. Well, I guess we might as well transition now to your major league career, a very extensive one. Getting into coaching, like, did you know that you wanted to be a coach after your playing days, or is it something that just happened organically?
Yeah, I think it's something that I'd always thought about because being a younger, I have two older brothers, 10 and 13 years older than I am. They were really good players. And so I was the bat boy. So I'd go to all their practices and watch them practice and watch how they did things. And, it was kind of a pretty good lead up, how they organize things, probably pretty good lead up to what I'm doing now. But, and then, getting into pro ball, I figured out pretty quick that I didn't have the talent to play in the big leagues. There were a lot younger guys and players than I was. And so it was going to be tough. So then I started thinking, well, maybe coaching, not, because I love the game. I wanted to stay in it. And, I spent, I think, a year and a half or 2 years playing and the Tigers during spring training in '98 offered me a coaching position with the Lakeland Tigers to help out. And I was actually the first extra coach they'd ever hired. Usually it was just the manager and pitching coach or just a manager at times back then. And so I gladly took it because, like I said, I knew that my playing career it was going to be a long, long, long shot for me to get to the big leagues.
Right. And well, credit to you for sort of, I guess, acknowledging that or knowing that. Was that sort of something that was tough to deal with, before maybe the coaching came up? Like, knowing kind of in the back of your head, I don't know if I'm going to make it to the majors as a player. Like, was that tough to deal with?
Yeah, initially, I think, because you go through Sarnia, St. Clair Community College, University of Kansas, and so if you're going to get drafted, you're probably a pretty good player. You got some talent anyway. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you walk into the first workout in Bristol, Virginia, and then you look around and you see all these great athletes running around that can throw better and hit the ball farther and all these things. So it's a little intimidating. It's like, okay, all these things that all the work you put in your entire life, and you kind of realize, it's not going to work out. But I love the game, and I even though there were a lot better players out there, I still want to learn the game and start learning how to coach and watch the coaches and see what they did and how they handled players. And thankfully it worked out.
Now, you talked about, when you were coaching with the Tigers organization, how did you end up making the move to the Yankees organization?
Actually, the guy that hired me with the Yankees was the guy that signed me with the Tigers as a player. So he went over to be the farm director with the Yankees, and the Eastern League that year, after the season was over, wanted to take a bunch of coaches and players to Russia to do some camps, and we were there for, I believe, 18 days. And I got to meet a bunch of Yankee people on that trip, and we started talking about names, and George Bradley's name came up. He's now the farm director with the Yankees, who had signed me with the Tigers. And I got back from Russia, and he called, and he offered me a contract, and so I had to call the Tigers and get permission to talk to the Yankees, and we got it done. So, and I was there ever since, and I've worked for three great organizations with Tigers and Yankees and Philly now. So I'm pretty happy about that and pretty fortunate.
Now, what are some of the challenges, or I guess differences, about coaching minor leaguers and working with minor leaguers, and then coaching and managing and major leaguers? What's the difference, both sort of on an on-field standpoint and off?
Well, I think innately, I think everyone wants to be led, and they want to be kind of told what to do and how to get better if you got any pride at all. So in that sense, it's not all that different. There's a lot more money in the big leagues and bigger egos at times, so you got to be careful with that. And sometimes you have to massage things a little bit more in the big leagues when you're dealing with players than you do in the minor leagues, because they're younger and less experienced, and there's not a whole lot of money tied up in them. But all in all, I think it's really very similar for me.
Interesting. I don't want to sound like a fanboy, but Derek Jeter, did you work with him? And there's the legend is that he's like the hardest working player, and his work ethic, his leadership, the whole deal. From your perspective, obviously you have more of an inside account. Can you tell us a little bit, maybe speak more to Derek Jeter's work ethic and just the leadership he gives to a team?
Yeah, so Derek, I had Derek when he was 18 in Greensboro in A-ball. And the year before that, Derek hit less than 200 in the Gulf Coast League, and he played really good defense. Now he goes to Greensboro, and he's hitting 300. He's made a ton of errors. So it told me something about the kid, and just watching him work every day and how consistent he was, and had a really good routine and stuck with it every day. And just the fact that these things that he was failing at, like a lot of errors or not being able to hit the year before, he maintained his confidence. He kept grinding. He kept working at it, and nothing seemed to slow him down. He really has a really good idea of what he wants to feel like going into a game. Wants to feel confident. Wants to feel like He's prepared as well as he can so that he can just go out, put his game on autopilot, and just go out and compete. But Derek was, like I said, he was 18 or 19 in Greensboro. And that year we had a particularly old team for A-ball. And a lot of 23, 24-year-old guys. But Derek, being as young as he was, you could tell that like he was the alpha male on the club. And not because he was a number one pick, just because of how he went about his business, how he treated other people with respect, whether it be his teammates or the umpires or the fans or the opposition, whomever, treated everybody with respect. And all these older guys just kind of fell in right behind him. And
Wow.
it really told me something about the player at that time and the makeup of Derek.
Working with Joe Girardi now in two different organizations, what makes him such an effective big league manager?
I think, well, he's very knowledgeable, number one. He's played, and he's an engineering, he's got a degree in engineering.
Oh,
And so he knows numbers, he knows analytics. So he's got this really good mix of old and new.
right.
And he really deals with players well. Great communicator, always on top of things, always caring about the player first, with the understanding that if we take care of the players, the team will take care of itself. And so, he goes out of his way to make sure that guys aren't injured. Guys know where they're supposed to go, where they're playing tomorrow, where they're hitting in the lineup. Great communicator, and the players really respect that. And because of that, he gets a bit more out of them.
Well, as we kind of head towards the end of this interview now, I want to start wrapping things up with some more general questions. Now in Philadelphia, what are you most looking forward to in 2021 about this Phillies team?
Well, we just signed JT Realmuto yesterday, and JT's one. I've been around some great catchers: Posada, McCann, Pudge Rodriguez. We had for a bit, Russell Martin, Gary Sanchez, Francisco Cervelli. It goes on and on. This guy's as good as any of them, and he's total package, offensive player, great defense. He's athletic. He's really tough. So I'm so happy that we were able to get it done and get him back. So, just getting these guys back together again. We've rebuilt our bullpen a little bit from last year, so that's going to help us. We still possibly need another middle infielder, but hopefully Dave can take care of that. But I'm really excited about the talent we have. I think it was we underachieved last year. I think there's more there. Even if we have the exact same team going into next year, I think there's more there, and we're going to have a better year.
And being a former catcher, I'd imagine, getting JT Realmuto back and not having him go to, let's say, Atlanta must have been a pretty big deal for not just you, but the organization. I want to talk a little bit about the Phillies organization. We know all about the Aaron Nolas, the Scott Kingerys, the Mickey Moniaks. Is there someone maybe below the surface, or perhaps even at the big league level, who isn't getting enough attention, you think, who maybe should be?
That's a good question. I think the guy that kind of stands out to me is, and he was up with us last year, Spencer Howard, one of our starting pitchers, and he'll probably be in our rotation this year. I don't know how long, because he hasn't really built up his innings throughout the minor leagues. But this kid's got a really good arm. He's got a great demeanor. He's got really good stuff, really good upside, and I can see him being a number 2 starter at some point in his career. And but we got to get him there, and we got to build his innings, and that's going to take a year or two, especially after last year. I think he got 40 some innings, and it's going to be tough. And I think you're going to see there's going to be a chance that you see an uptick of injuries this year, just because you go from 60 games to 162. It's pretty big load to carry.
No kidding. Well, we're going to end it there, Rob. Thank you so much for joining us today. I had a million other questions for you. Perhaps, one day we can do this again and even have another chat, because this was so great. Thank you so much for joining us. I'd imagine the fans who were watching are just thrilled to get to hear all the great stories you shared and all your great experiences. Rob, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Jackson. I'll come on anytime.
Absolutely. Really appreciate it. Well, that was the first episode of the sort of revamped IBL on Deck, sponsored by Rawlings. I hope you enjoyed it. I sure did. And, feel free to perhaps submit questions for whoever our next guest is. We'll let you know about that in the coming weeks. So for the IBL on Deck, sort of production crew and the IBL, I'm Jackson Farough. Have a good evening. We'll see you next time, everyone.